creators. My name is Making Sang, first name Making, and you are watching the FOMO Creator Show. FOMO means the fear of missing out. And in business, it's a good thing. So if you want to know how to sell out your next conference, festival, digital challenge, your webinar, your book launch, your product, your service launch, you have come to the right place. Now, today, I'm a bit proper excited because I've got my good friend Keith Smith with me today, and we are going to be talking about how to create FOMO from a creative agency. Now, let's bring Keith up to the screen. How are you, Keith? How are you? Oh,
well, hello.
Did I interrupt you?
Sorry, yes, I was just catching up on some. No, sorry, I was just. How are you? That's a lot of energy you got there. Bring in the energy.
Absolutely. Now, at the start of the show, I always like to ask, who is Keith Smith? Who is Keith Smith indeed? Now, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, my lovely.
Yeah, certainly. Well, you know, it's funny, isn't it? I had this conversation the other day. We were talking about when people say tell us a bit about yourself. People always revert to what they do for work. And if you go to like in France or Italy, people, you ask somebody in France what they do, and they say something like, I eat, I breathe, I make love, and all these kind of things. And work is just so far down the line. Whereas what we like to identify ourselves with first is work. But so, yeah, apart from all those things, all those wonderful things that I do in the outdoors, I am in charge to make money on a day-to-day basis. This thing over my shoulder here is the Advertist, and it's a database. Basically, it's just we help creative agencies find clients just through supplying them with intelligence and news and research and stuff like that. So it just kind of helps them get a picture on what's going on. But apart from that, yes, I mean, that's just the day job anyway.
Fabulous. Now we've got a few people tuning in from Instagram. So Middle Ground Theatre Company, lovely to see you. Hello. We've got the Growth Coaching Collective who've said hello as well. And Kat and Tay as well, a regular viewer. Lovely to see you as well. Now with all of my guests, I do like to explain how we met. People who I bring onto the show are not just anybody. They're either my friends, people who I admire, people who are doing some great stuff in the world of FOMO in their respective industry. So the next bit is how we met. So Keith, do you remember how we met?
I do. Yes, we met because of the lately Kate Bradley Churnis introduced us because she said that you were an advocate of the Lately software, social media software, and I wanted to talk to somebody who knew how it worked and used it to their best ability. And so yeah, she put us together. And of course, I mean, as soon as anybody, I'm sure everybody feels the same once they meet you. Making is like, it's an unforgettable experience. And as soon as you do, it's like, I realized that you've obviously got a huge talent for this, and I just wanted to stick around, and I'll hang out in your green room. That's not a problem.
Now, talking about talent, you of course also are host and producer of the Fuel podcast, and you very kindly invited me to be on your show, and we talked about the age of influence, didn't we? Do you remember that many years ago?
Yeah, that was a long time ago, but that was 2 studios ago actually. But yeah, that was because I think at the time the word influencer or the term influencer marketing was kind of still very new to people, and of course you've been doing it for a while and you knew all about it, and obviously me being a bit of a news hound, I was very keen to find out more myself. So as always, sort of when I need to know something, I just talk to people who know a hell of a lot more about it than I do. So yeah, but it was a great interview, and still actually clocks up the numbers, funnily enough.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say, and it's still very relevant to today as well. Because when it comes to talking about influence, I mean, we're not all Kardashians, but we do have an element of influence, and it's about embracing that and showing up and really encouraging people to stand up and listen, because we all have a community that can deal, that can deal with, could do with a little help, of course.
Mm,
Now, we actually had the pleasure of working together as well.
did.
Do you remember this?
Oh, Nick and Dave. Nick and Dave. Love them. Love them. But yeah, that was well, that was that whole initiative was it's a sad tale for our times, I think, was the fact that you had four very keen, enthusiastic, uh, sort of minor, vertically targeted, vertically integrated influencers. And the idea was that we all came together to try and, sort of help shine a light on the problems that the Earth, the planet, was facing in terms of the environment, and all with the best of intentions. And I think we dug out some really good guests and had some interesting conversations and good interviews with people. But I think the problem with it was that the thing we arrived at very, very quickly in our research was the fact that it's not the people at fault are the people that won't change their minds, that aren't going to make any changes. They're the politicians. They are the ones that need to make the changes in order for things to happen. And then you can't just do it in one country. You have to do it around the world. And as you well know, we spoke to people in South America and people in Asia and Australia and stuff, and they're at different stages of their environmental education, and so we can't all get to the same point at the same time, and that is the biggest problem. And I think that was the thing that we very quickly realized was going to be the inhibitor for any great change we were trying to bring about.
I mean, one of the positive impacts that we did have on this project, which is Stream Aid Live, trying to raise awareness about the environment, was that single that is slap bang in the middle. The world is ours. So a younger musician, he released a single which was our theme tune, wasn't it? And he managed to get 2,500 downloads. That was the positive story of our little project. So whilst we didn't save the planet, we did talk to some interesting people. But that young musician had the biggest download of his career, which is fantastic. So that was all positive, wasn't it?
No, I mean, I don't regret the time at all. I think it was a good investment for us all, because I think all four of us, we came at it from different perspectives, and because we were all learning from the same set of facts, I think it was interesting how we all kind of evolved. And to be honest, I'm a much better evangelist for environmental issues than if I hadn't have had those conversations, because now I've spoken to experts. So I'm speaking from a position of stuff that's actually facts, not just stuff I've picked up off some crazy website somewhere.
Absolutely. So yeah, it was a fabulous project that the four of us worked on. But this is all about you, Keith, and we want to go back to you and the Advertist and the Fuel podcast and how creative agencies can create PR. So we want to talk about the ABCs of FOMO. Right. Now, this is where we want to showcase your authority. We want to showcase how Keith shows up on the socials, on the emails, picking up the phone, that kind of stuff. And this next slide probably best describes that.
Yeah. I don't know what to say about that. I think that's I think what it illustrates is the fact that there are so many different places that you can show up, and we'll probably come on to this point later, but there are so many different personas and channels that you arrive from and go to that require a different approach. And I think that's something that somebody of my generation, of my age, finds extraordinary. I mean, it's something that it's a learning curve for everybody, and it's difficult for people, because when I was growing up, when I was in my 30s, 20s and 30s, there was TV, there were radio, there were magazines, there was cinema, and there were posters. That was basically the only way, and newspapers, obviously, but that was the only way you got information. And now everybody has so many different places that they can draw information from, and I think it makes for an interesting challenge for people who want to present their business. Is that there are certain ways that you show up on LinkedIn that just wouldn't work on Twitter or X or whatever, and so you have to kind of have this chameleon sort of ability, which is chameleonistic. Is that a word? Anyway, but yeah, you have to have you have to have that chameleonism. You have to be able to practice chameleonism.
And you really raised a good point there, because we can't be everything everywhere all at once. I can't do
exactly like your poster says.
But we have to do the best that we can. So you're absolutely right. Appearing on LinkedIn, we have to have a different persona on Twitter or X. Same as Instagram, but the only thing that we can control, I suppose, and be our true selves, is on a podcast, which you do really well. Now we've got a few listeners in, few from Instagram. So I just wanted to say a quick hello to John, who I did a photo shoot with recently, and he helped by creating some video footage. So it's lovely to see you.
Oh, I saw those photographs as well.
We've got the fabulous Alison Two Minds as well, who talks about leadership, which is fantastic. And Fuchsia Beverly Ann also joining from Instagram. And the fabulous Joe Nutkins has moved over from Instagram into LinkedIn because she knows that she can get her name up in lights for a couple of minutes. So lovely to see you, Joe. I hope you are enjoying this show so far. Now, we've talked about the authentic authority, how Keith shows up, and he shows up authentically across all the platforms, of course. And the next bit is best described by this next slide, which is BTS. No, I don't mean the global K-pop sensation. I mean behind the scenes. So, Keith, tell me, what is this telling us about you?
Oh dear. Well, I spend a lot of time either reading or broadcasting, or I mean, it's a very mundane existence, but I do kind of try. I mean, that the snap that's top right there is that was actually in the motorhome, where actually we bought a motorhome, because I'm based in the United States, but we bought a motorhome and converted it into a rolling office, which was fantastic. And that was my first ever attempt to do a podcast from the motorhome, which was quite interesting. It was and it all worked. Got all the technology to work. But that was fun. Normally, though, you'll find me in one of those two other positions, which is either talking into the microphone as I am now, or reading by the microphone, which is how I started this whole show. But yeah, so I mean, it's broadcasting, isn't it? And the interesting thing is, maybe this is a good time to introduce. I just wanted to do a bit of a shout out, because I don't know whether you know, but today is the 60th anniversary of pirate radio, of Radio Caroline.
Oh, wow!
And this was the time when radio broke away from the normal. Radio Caroline came out because it was an offshore. It was broadcast from a ship, and it was free from the constraints of all the kind of normal sponsorships and things that radio was suffering from at the time. And it was very much a sort of a very 1950s, sort of waxed moustache type radio. And Radio Caroline was all jeans and greased hair and rock and roll and stuff like that. So today is the 60th anniversary of the inaugural shows from Radio Caroline. The reason that I mention that is because, going back to those photographs, is because there's a part of me that thinks that what we're doing, what you're doing now, me with the podcasting and stuff like that, is very similar to the mentality behind Radio Caroline, which is to do things slightly differently, to not be constrained by all the normal commercial problems that you have, with sponsors demanding that you can't say this and you have to say that. We're free on the air, and I think that's, it's a marvelous thing, and it's a great thing that you do, and I really 100% support everything that you do in terms of the broadcast. But I think that we need to keep it up. We need to keep that. I think they call it the fifth estate. I think that's the term that we fall under. But yeah, keeping going and keeping broadcasting, keep it. Is like, that's so important.
I love that. And Jo was just responding to my previous comment. She says she always enjoys my show. She's actually listening to an older one of my lives. Then the notification popped up for this one, which is great. Fabulous. Now, the next part of the show is probably best described by this slide, which is to create content for the lurkers. Now, when it comes to showcasing who you are, showcasing your authority, doesn't matter which platform you are on. As Keith said, you have to adjust your personality to suit the platform. But in creating that content for your lurkers, you never know who is watching. And when the time is right for them, they will slide into your DMs. Now, Keith, how do you create content for your lurkers? Just want to share a little bit about what we've got here.
Right. Well, this is all about this very much follows my philosophy on how agencies grow and how companies in general should, can grow, is this principle which I kind of crudely call the sort of flywheel principle. The idea that you do one thing and then you're able to then make that thing happen in various other places using different, I mean, like we were talking about, you have to show up being a different person on LinkedIn than you are on Instagram or on Twitter and everything else, but you still carry the same message, you still carry the same responsibilities for the business. Now, my responsibility always is that thing on the left hand side of the screen, which is the Advertist, this thing behind me. Everything I do has to generate money for the Advertist. That's fundamentally, it's the thing that myself and my wife, who's my business partner, everything we do is like, does it generate money for the Advertist? If yes, do it. If no, don't do it. Simple as that. And now all those other things that those arrows are going to are things that we do either on LinkedIn or the Fuel podcast or whatever, that are all related to, but not the same as, the Advertist. So they're all like, for example, the Fuel podcast is not about data and contacts and selling. It's about growth. It's about how agencies grow. So that's the interest there. On LinkedIn, we're talking about me being an authority, having the right to be able to comment on people's opinions and to be able to add to them, give weight to them, all that kind of thing. It's important, but you have to keep showing. There's a newsletter down there on the bottom right, which I send out through Beehive to my community as well. So there's lots of different touch points people can reach me on, and depending on how, and it's like you, depending on how you show up, they can always find you back doing what it is that you do. But I think it's this flywheel principle is key to it. Is you've got to work out what the it is, what sits at the center of what it is that you do, and then after that you've then got to work out which platforms work for you and how that message best manifests on those platforms.
And I think you've raised a really good point there, because, way back when you started your agency, you said there were a few distractions. There was TV
Sure.
and radio, printed magazines. When the internet came about, there were studies that were put about that we needed 7 touch points. So people needed to see us 7 times before they
Right.
make a decision as to whether to go onto our website. Now that's actually increased to 25 times now, which is even more important as to why we should try and appear on as many platforms as our energies can sustain, but do it really well. And so I think what I love about you, Keith, is that you do that really well. You've got that one piece of content, which then you then share across all of your different avenues and all your different touch points. And I also you mentioned Beehive as well. Now I don't really know much about that, but it's a closed community of
Sure.
your kind of people, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a Substack basically. It's another sort of type of Substack, except it's not quite so. I mean, Substack got very, very populated very, very quickly, and so there are a lot of domains became unavailable. And it was our friend, somebody you know as well, Ian Truscott, told me that to get on over to Beehive, because that's where it's all happening these days. So I use it and I like it. I think it's a very nice, easy to use platform, and it just works really well as a way of kind of. And I also use Linktree. I didn't mention that as well, but I keep a Linktree maintained as well, because there's so many different things, and I keep my Linktree is always on the bottom of every email that goes out from me. So if people want to find out more about what it is that I do, instead of having 1,000 links underneath, in my signature, it's just the one to Linktree, and once you get on there, then it shows you all the different areas that the business itself sort of manifests. But yeah, it's so difficult to try and keep your finger on everything.
And these are just another few ways in which people can, see your fabulous work. So if you just wanted to talk through some of these images that you've got here.
Yes, certainly. We've got on the left-hand side there, that linking in is a new show that I've launched with another friend of mine, Natasha Ellard Shoefield, and she is one of the most respected business agency new business developers. And she's great because she's always got a good opinion on things, and we work very well together as a duo. And we've just released these little podlets, which are basically little coffee break coffee break podcasts. And the idea is we'll just pick on a subject. We've got one coming out just after Easter, where we're talking about, do names matter? Like, for example, if you're launching a creative agency, what you call it, does that make any difference? When you launch it. Then we've also got I can't see all the different bits and pieces you've got down there, but I mean, there's obviously the podcast, which is a sort of a fabulous sort of taken off really well for us, and my LinkedIn is very much an expression of, I think it was John Asperian, no, it was a researcher who told me that the culture, the way that LinkedIn views itself, is that it wants to be seen as the remote office that people always wish they worked in. And so the way I behave on LinkedIn is very much the way I would behave if I was in the office. So that's why I'm better off working on my own.
Is that badly? You behave badly, do you?
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh, good. Well, this next segment is probably best described by this next video. Back to the FOMO. And Joe was just saying, there's just so much FOMO. She doesn't know what to watch, whether she wants to play catch up or wants to watch this show. So much FOMO. Now, we've been talking to Keith about well, he's been inspiring creative agencies on how they can show up, showcase their authority, show a little bit of behind the scenes, and also how they can also create content for the lurkers as well. But let's bring Keith back up to the stage because we want to talk a little bit about this.
Well, okay. Yeah, now that is I think that it's quite interesting. Those two nerdy fellas there are the founders of Unix, which was the one of the foundational software developers for computers in the early days. Back in a time when 4 bits of information was a huge payload of data. Now, the reason that I picked on them is because I'm doing a series of workshops with agencies, talking about, and this fundamentally goes back to what I was just saying about the flywheel principle, and there are so many different areas that we can all manifest, that we can all show up on, and you know we're so spread so thin these days that my answer to that and is the way that I behave, which is basically to say, okay, well, out of 20, there's 3 that I really want to do, you know, a lot of that work for me. So I'm going to focus just on those. Okay. So for me, it's the podcast, it's LinkedIn, and it's the Advertist itself. So those are my 3 platforms. Now, beyond that, anything else that's all gravy, you know, after that. But what these 2 nerds at Unix developed, okay, they had this philosophy that a piece of software should do one thing only, but do it well. Just do it well. If you want it to do other things, build another piece of software. All right. That was the way that they worked. And I think that's a very interesting way, because we're all now faced with so many different ways or things that we have to do, that we're giving commitments to and everything else. Then just pick on like an email or social media, LinkedIn, or a podcast, and just do those things and do them well. Hello.
I absolutely love that. And I know someone else who will appreciate that, who's just tuned in on Instagram, who is Jerry King, who is a web designer. So I'm sure that
Oh,
you can appreciate this photograph.
well,
Now,
I was going to say
go ahead, Keith.
the other part to that is that the reason that there's all that copy there as well is the fact that those are topics that that I'm covering in the next season, or the next set of workshops, which are to do with, you know, basically an advanced form of business development. So those are the areas that you can concentrate on to help you find, you know, the right client to help build your business, rather than just taking any piece of business because you need the money.
Oh, brilliant. And how can people sign up to those workshops that you've got coming up? Do you know?
Well, at the moment they're already booked out, but I'm hoping to go solo and to produce some more. So if there is enough demand, if people want to see it, then I'm more than happy to give a presentation to a business and go through it on a one-to-one basis as a consultancy. All this is going about because this is all leading towards the book, which is coming out towards the end of this year, and the book is basically, you know, about sort of beyond the brainstorm. So this is all content that I'm generating as part of writing a book, going through that process. Again, back to this flywheel thing. It's like I'm writing a book, so all this other content that I'm generating as part of the writing a book turns into a workshop, or turns into blog posts, or a newsletter, or something else like that. So there always has to be, instead of doing 15 different things, do one thing, do it well, and make sure that it goes out through all the platforms that you can excel at. God, I sound like a teacher, don't I? I sound boring. Okay. Yes, there's all the things I'm not doing. Like I said at the start, the things that when I'm not working, those are the things that I do.
Oh, so what have we got here? You're part of a team, you rescue pets, you're a prepper. What's a prepper?
All right. Well, let's just take them all one by one. Very much part of a team. My wife is my business partner. She and there is no way that I could have done all the things that I do without her help and support. She's very much the brains of the operation. And I'm front of house. And people often ask us, sort of, how is it possible that you can live and work together? And they often ask Donna that sort of question. I mean, not quite that way. They tend to ask her as like, how come you haven't strangled him yet, and things like that. But I mean, I know what they mean. I know that's really what they mean. But she's hugely important to the business. Yes, we rescue pets. We have a house full of pets. We rescued 4 cats in the last 12 months. Those 3 little black kittens are all sisters, and we have a black and white one that came from the same mother as well. And 2 dogs that came from the rescue home. They're 2 sisters. Yes, the prepper thing. Okay, the prepper thing is it's just about just being ready for the unexpected events in life, and I think that's something that age has brought me. And in fact, I brought a little prop along here, which I thought you might get a kick out of. It's this. This little thing here. This is a Jackery. Okay. And it's let me get it in front of the camera so you can see it. All right.
Yeah.
It's a power pack. It's a solar powered power pack. I have a bunch of these. I've got different sizes. I've got one that can run a freezer that's big enough to run a freezer. And the reason that it's important is because, and I actually believe that if there are going to be any disasters in this world, okay, the one that's really most likely to happen is going to be a power outage, and we lose power for, and I don't know if this has happened to you recently, but it happened to me 2 years ago, which is why we started buying these Jackeries. Was we lost power for 3 days, and you would be amazed at how panic stricken you can get after 3 days of no power. You forget how reliant on electricity you are, and suddenly all the things that are in your freezer start to melt. And we were literally, fortunately it was sunny, and we had the solar panels out, and we had the batteries that were running the house. But then we thought, okay, we're fine. We've got one big Jackery that's good enough to keep the freezer going. But then we've got pumps in the fish pond. We've got all these different things that need power, and you can't run them all off one. You've got to have different things. So the reason I say prepper is because it's important just to be prepared for unexpected events. And what I think is an unexpected event that's most likely to happen will be a power outage situation. And if that happens, at least we can keep the computers running, we can keep the freezer running, we can keep the pets fed and dry and warm and everything else like that. So that's why I do that.
And it's a great metaphor for business as well, isn't it? I mean, when we were talking offline earlier, you were saying that quite a lot of creative agencies tend to focus on their current customers, which, obviously you should do, because they want to give excellent customer service and all the rest of it. But if they're not prepping for the outage where suddenly they don't have clients, then they're a bit scuppered, aren't they? So you need to prepare by creating content for your lurkers, by showcasing your authority, by doing that one piece really well, and then broadcasting it to the world. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as business is concerned, I mean, just look what happened with Twitter, now X, in that there was a migration of advertisers pulled out, people changed platforms all of a sudden, and if you were reliant on that, look at what's happening with TikTok. That in the United States, you've got people whose entire livelihoods are dependent on TikTok running. And if the government decides that TikTok is no longer going to run, or it's going to change hands or whatever, then you need to have a plan B. You've always got to have a backup plan. And I think, that is what all this has taken. It's great to have all these different platforms, but they're not always going to be around. So you have to be able to, to waltz as well as jive, and as well as, oh God, that's showing my age, but to waltz and if anybody hip hops, maybe you should do that, too.
Oh, now let's go back to a little bit about you then. So we've talked about you being a prepper. You were once in a one-hit 80s band, and you were once dressed up as a cod and worked with Mr. Blobby.
I did.
Talk about your 80s band. I've got a pop story as well. So tell us about your 80s band, one-hit wonder.
Well, back when I was a nipper, I was a singer in a band, and we made a record, and it was produced by this fellow called Peter Banks, and Peter Banks happened to be the keyboard player for a band called After the Fire, who had just had a massive or was big hit at the time in 1982, hit called Der Kommissar. Okay. And it was an original hit by a guy called Falco, and it did really well. But it just disappeared. It got really hot for about a month and then disappeared. And they had a couple of albums after that, but they never quite achieved the same success as with Der Kommissar. But fast forward another 25 years on from there, and I stayed in touch with Peter, and we carried on talking and stuff like, we always talk. And he phoned me up one day and he said, "You'll never guess what's happened." So I said, "What?" And he said, Der Kommissar got played on an episode of Friends. Okay. It was a flashback scene that they did when they were all back in college, and they played Der Kommissar. And so suddenly there was this revival of the band, and they were asked to go on tour, but their lead singer had gone off and done something else. And Pete said, "Would you fancy coming along and doing it for us?" So I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not? I'll do it." And it was just like, that typical stupid story that you see in British movies, that this band suddenly gets back together again and goes on tour. But it wasn't Crazyville or anything else like that. We did a tour for a year, and we did the Greenbelt Festival, which was fantastic. I think the photograph up there is from the Greenbelt Festival. We had about 800 to 1,500 people at various gigs. But that was basically it. That was the sort of the end of my music career. I won't do it anymore. But it was good to have done it, and I really enjoyed doing it. And the most embarrassing thing that actually happened was that one big hit, Der Kommissar. That at that gig we played, and halfway through we decided that what we were going to do was stop the track and then have everybody clap along and start chanting the chorus and everything else like that. So we got that far, and then because the band was old and the guitarist was wearing hearing aids and things like that, I mean, he couldn't hear it come back in. He couldn't get the song count, and so it all ground to a halt. The song just ground completely to a halt, and we're all standing, and I could see everybody in the audience looking at us going, "This is the one song you're known for, and you can't even do that."
I love that. That's amazing. Oh, that is fantastic. And then finally we had what do we have? You once dressed up as a cod and worked with Mr. Blobby.
Well, back in the early days of computer games, so we're talking the mid-90s, I worked for a company called Millennium, and that was the company that produced it. Was an old BBC software, used to produce computer software for the BBC, and it got into computer games, and one of the characters they had was an old platform game called James Pond, and he was a fish, and he was a double agent, and it was all full of British puns. It was very funny. But when I joined them as their sales and marketing manager, and I think on day 2 or 3, I think the managing director came up to me and he said, right, he said, okay, we've got a job for you. So he says, I want you to pose with this Porsche car. So I was like, oh, great, excellent, yeah, I'd love to do that. And he said, but you've got to have to wear a fish outfit as well. So there I was, dressed as a fish, on my 2nd or 3rd day at work, posing next to one of the nicest Porsches I've ever stood beside. But and so it's a warning to everybody who wants to get into public relations. Sometimes that stuff can happen too.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, the next segment of the show is FOMO promo.
Okay.
FOMO shout out. So this is where I invite all the people who've been watching live. Just if you're on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter, you just want to put in who you are and what you do, so that if people wanted to connect with you, they can do. I'm afraid this isn't available on Instagram at the moment, but if you want to join Joe Cassante, jump over from Instagram to LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter. You can absolutely do that. Now, in the meantime, let's talk to Keith. Now, Keith, how can people get in touch with you if they want to find out more about the Advertist or the Fuel podcast?
Well, like I said, I mean, I have a link tree, and and there are lots of different ways, but really the easiest way to reach me is through LinkedIn. I am on Twitter as at Fuel Podcast, but it's I'm mainly on LinkedIn, and people can find me if you just Google Keith Smith, etc. on LinkedIn. You'll get me, and then I'm always happy to hear from people, and it'd be great. Yeah, why not? Oops.
You mentioned that you're fully booked at the moment with your workshops that are coming up. So is the best way to connect with you on LinkedIn so that people can notify you, so you can let people know when your next bunch of workshops will be?
Yeah, I'm like I said, I mean, I treat it like the office environment, and I am the office chatterbox. So I'm always broadcasting something on LinkedIn. So and if when the next show is ready or when the book is ready, then it'll go out first on LinkedIn.
Lovely. Now tell us more about your book, Keith.
Well, this came about because of the podcast. I've been speaking to so many gifted, brilliant, creative people who are all at the top of their game. And, one way or in one form or another, I've always asked them similar questions about, well, sort of what is your approach to growth? How have you managed to, to become successful and stuff? And so I've kind of looked back across all those recordings and all those podcasts that I've done, and I thought, there's some gems of information in here. There's some really useful bits and pieces that if you didn't listen to the podcast, you'd never know. And a lot of these people are, some of these people that I'm interviewing are in their 60s, 70s and 80s, and they're probably due to retire. They want to get out of the business. So I didn't want to lose that valuable information. So I thought, well, it'd be really useful to try and get some form of publication together that condensed all that material into matched what they said with what I was saying. And the whole theory behind Beyond the Brainstorm is that, you can't these days. Back in the 60s and 70s, you as an agency, you could thrive just by being a very creative person or bunch of people. But now, because there's so many different platforms, because there are so many different nuances to employment these days, you absolutely have to know the nuts and bolts of business. and all the different subtle differences between all the different platforms and different methods of reaching out to people or generating business. So the point is, it's not enough just to be creative. You absolutely have to have a suite of business tools behind you at the same time, and you've got to be aware of the bottom line and all that kind of thing. So that's where the title Beyond the Brainstorm comes from, is the thinking beyond those creative things and getting into the sort of nuts and bolts of it.
That's absolutely brilliant. Well, thank you so much for that, Keith. Now, it wouldn't be the FOMO Creator Show if I didn't show a little bit of FOMO promo myself. And if you enjoyed this show and would like to know how you can create FOMO for your business, well, I do have a special offer on at the moment, which is my FOMO Hour Surprise. Surprise, because it's 90 minutes rather than 60. And for anyone who is watching this video, my FOMO Hour Surprise is normally £175, but for Sunday business Small Business Sunday winners, SBS winners, it is £100. And for anyone viewing this video today, it is £125. Now, I've also got another fabulous offer that people have been taking up on, which has been amazing. Now, last week, we talked to the fabulous Kerry Jordan from Fur and Fables. And she went to the UK's biggest dog show, Crufts, and she wanted to work with potential exhibitors. And she's a little bit shy. She's a bit of an introvert. I'm an ambivert, so I sometimes have introvert moments, sometimes have extrovert moments. And so she wore this fabulous glow tag to capture people's attention so that people will say, oh, I wonder what that is. And this is what she wore. So it's a QR code which people can scan immediately to get to her website. And as she's a commercial pet photographer, she was walking around Crufts with her fabulous phone and taking photographs, just to give a little insight into what a smartphone can do. But if you wanted proper photographs with a proper camera, then you need to find out more from Kerry by scanning the QR code. Now, I've got a special offer on. It's been available throughout the whole of March. If you go to surefire.com/product/glow tags, add in glow tag FOMO to get 10% off, and this is available for the next 3 days. So don't miss out. Go get your glow tag. You don't want to miss out, right? The final thing, which I'm a bit proper excited about, is I am going to be running my first event. It is going to be called Hype Your Business Live, and it's going to be in Chesterfield, home of the Twisted Crooked Spire, as you can see there. It's on November the 13th. That's my birthday. I'm going to celebrate my 51st birthday with everybody. Now, if you do come along, you're going to hear from some incredible speakers. You're going to be networking with incredible conference organizers, networking events, small business owners, and we're also going to have an exhibitor space as well. Because if you're as disorganized as I am, you haven't got Christmas all set out yet, then you may want to come to the Christmas exhibition fair and grab those last minute Christmas presents. So that's what I'm planning at the moment. Do save the date. I will be giving out more information once I've figured out the branding behind it. I've booked the venue. I've booked the venue, the Chesterfield Football Club. Great transport links. So if you're a transport girl, it's easy to get to via the train. Obviously, there's loads of parking space with it being a football ground, and people can fly into Manchester, perhaps. And I hope to see you there. So I will be telling you more about that, who the speakers are, who the sponsors are, and that kind of thing as I get them coming along. But do save the date on the 13th. Now, Keith, it's been amazing talking to you. Let's bring you back up to the stage. Any final words before we end this broadcast?
Well, no, I mean, apart from the fact that that I'd like to obviously thank you for your time, and thank everybody else that's come along and taken the time to listen to us. And yeah, I mean, thank you very much for the platform. I do appreciate it, and it's nice to be able to do this again. Nice to work with you again. And hopefully we get a few more opportunities to do it in the not too distant future anyway. But no, it's been very useful. And if anybody needs to reach me, as I say, just reach out through LinkedIn, and you can find me at Keith Smith, etc. And yeah, I'm happy to respond to your DMs.
Fantastic. This has been the FOMO Creator Show. You've been watching Making Sang, First Name Making. And if I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Wrong video. I meant this one. Hashtag making mistakes.